To pick people, Jess, because everybody's thing is different.
Yeah, I know. Oh, that's totally fine. I am an excellent facilitator. Watch, here I go. Okay, so we're gonna start with Dara, and then we'll go to Jim.
Yep. I'm Dara Jewell. I am in Wichita, Kansas. And I know Jess because my partner and the father of my 2-year-old and 1-day daughter is Jess's videographer and has been friends with her for years and years, and we've become friends. So yeah, that's me.
She also helps out with social media posts and stuff because I barely know how to log in. She won't.
I do. If you see a broken link or a misspelling, that's probably my fault.
Okay, so Jim, you're up next, and then Abby.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim. I live in central Colorado, and I met Jess in Eureka, and we had an amazing time putting on a very challenging workshop between gun nuts and gun haters, and it went great in most ways. And I just did this on a lark, and frankly, I wouldn't still be participating if I hadn't already found a lot of value in the book and the whole head heart action rubric. So I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, and I love the word rubric, so you get 2 points. Good job. Okay, so next Abby, and then we'll go to Alan.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm in California. I met Jess at a California Society for Association Executives meeting, actually twice, and have always been
a groupie.
Pardon me?
A groupie.
A groupie, yes, I'll admit to being a groupie. And I always get some insight when I read your emails, and I got very excited about this with the book. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to see you again, and I'm sorry we're not at a conference.
I know.
All right, so Alan, and then we'll go to Erin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Vasquenian. I'm from Santa Monica, California. Jess, I met you at American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine meeting, I think in Arizona about 3-4 years ago. And when I got the email, I thought I was going to read the book on my own. So I thought it would be great to do it in a group. So that's why I'm here. And I also like rubric.
Look, 2 more points for you. And I'm emceeing their conference this year in February. So we'll see you then too. So don't get sick of me yet. Okay, great. So then Erin, and then we'll go to Patty.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Hoffman, and I live in the uptown neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois. And I'm here because I love what Jess has to say, what she has to share, and it helps me be a better me. So thanks, Jess.
Excellent. And we also did some very good work together immediately following George Floyd. So good
That's
job.
right.
Okay, great. And by George Floyd, I mean George Floyd's murder. So probably shouldn't just say George Floyd. So thank you, Erin. So Patty, and then we'll go to Hillary.
Hi, I am Patty, and I live in Minnesota. And so the George Floyd thing is very close to my heart. Immediate impacts in my little world I live in. I met you, Jess. I didn't meet you personally. I saw you give a keynote speaker at the National Park and Recreation Association. I think it was in 2017 in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And
Confederate statues, if I remember correctly.
And it what?
Peak Confederate statue conversations. Yes.
Oh. And what you had to say just resonated so much with me. And so I'm excited to be in a book club to have a conversation around it instead of just like, well, that was good. And then nobody else was excited as I was about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Patty. Great to see you again.
Thank
you. Then Hillary, and then we'll go to Anita.
I'm Hillary, and I live outside of Dallas, Texas, a little town called Flower Mound. And I met Jess. Actually, I watched her at that same conference, and then Jess came out and worked with our team. It was about a year ago, almost exactly. That was very helpful, talking about diversity and inclusion. And I'm a book nerd, so I love study groups. So I thought it sounded fun, and I watch what Jess puts out. So I just knew it'd be exciting, and I'd learn a lot.
Excellent. And your whole Thrive Center is opened now, correct?
We opened in October.
COVID opened, right?
COVID opened.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good to hear. Okay, Anita and then Jax.
Hi, I'm Anita Corey. I currently live in eastern Iowa near Iowa City, and I work at the University of Iowa. But before that, I lived in Washington State for over 20 years, and I met Jess, like her work intersected greatly with mine. I used to work with fraternities and sororities on college campuses, and we've been roommates at a conference. Huge privilege to have that much time with Jess Pettit. Gonna throw that out there right now, and just fun. And so I, like somebody else, I love being in book club, the accountability of a book group, like, oh my gosh, I got to read. Like I self-impose the pressure probably, like I got to read so I don't look foolish covering, but whatever. So I bought this book in 2017 and look how pristine it still looks, Jess. It's just so pretty, except for where it got shoved on the bookshelf and crinkled a little bit. So anyway, then I realized it was, but I printed the ebook too. So I got 2 copies now. So I'm just really excited to really make the commitment to read it and kind of digest the material and be part of this group. So thanks for doing it, Jess.
Absolutely. Here's the long friendships and learning new stuff, right? That's
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Jax, you're up next, then Julianne.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jax Wheatley. I'm from the Portland, Oregon area. And I'm here because I met Jess at a Butch Voices conference a few years ago and fell madly in love with a huge crush on Jess. And so I'm just like this follower who bows at her feet.
Also, probably important to mention my accountant, who now knows way more about my spending habits, and the crush is still present. So I feel like that's good news. Thank you very much, Jax, for coming. So then Julianne, and then Julie, you're going to close us out with intros.
Hi, my name's Julianne Sullivan. I'm in Pittsburgh, PA. Jess, did you get a package from me?
I sure did. Did you get your thank you card yet?
Not yet. Thank you. All right. No, it's there. Okay, now that we got that done. All right. Awesome. Good one. I am a Jess Pettit groupie, no doubt about it. I feel like I kind of bore this book myself because I was like around when it was a thought. So, it's awesome. And a group like this, well, Jess and I have been in a couple other groups. I'm just constantly expanding and learning. And so I'm happy to be here.
Yay! Oh, thank you very much. And Julie.
Thanks. I am in Chicago on the north side, right up the road from Erin. And I don't think we've ever actually met personally, but I was in the year before you did the plenary at the Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine when you had a breakout. I was there. And then I was so excited to see you on the following year on the main stage. I think that's how it happened. And I don't remember who made the quote about you don't remember what was said, but you remember how you feel when somebody's inspires you. And that was my experience in those 2 lectures, and sort of has been since, as I think I begged my way into your Facebook group when you were close to full, and I've been sort of following you peripherally. And so I was excited to be able to set some time aside to do this. So thank you.
Bunch of groupies, Jess.
I know, this is going to be great. Y'all are going to save me therapy copays. Wonderful.
You are welcome.
Well, I really appreciate everyone being here, and I did beta test the questions because they make sense in my head, but we have all learned that inside here is not necessarily reflective of outside here. And if you haven't yet, you're about to learn that that is relevant to you as well. So I think that it's a solid conversation piece, and I think it's a really good way to start the year. So I am going to start the live stream thing now. So, buckle up, take a vaccination, do what you need to do. But I think it's going to work. Maybe. Stay tuned. Yep. Here it comes. Slow. Yep. Man, this is very slow. 1 minute, please. Go grab a beverage. I just want it to be on my page. Go, next. Ugh. Sorry. Welcome to
Technology.
Technology and all of my weird imposter syndromes. Like any of you have not also had to just click on things and see if it works. Back to Canvas issues. It looks like it's loading. Here it comes. 2 more seconds. Talk amongst yourselves. If we didn't say this before.
I love your tree, Anita. I can't hear you, but.
Thanks. 2 reasons it's still there. Lazy, don't care. Okay, 3 reasons. My 17-year-old son's Christmas present still hasn't arrived. And I said, dang it, the tree stays till the present gets here. You sit in
Makes
front of the
sense to
tree
me.
and a picture gets taken. That's what's happening. So hopefully it won't be July. But
I've had them up till April, so.
okay. All right. I'm thinking of switching out the decorations and putting Valentine's on it or
Oh,
something.
there you go.
You know.
I hope you do that. I'd like to see that on our next call. So
Yeah,
Oh,
every
that's a
month we could
That's
just.
a big goal by next week. I don't know, but we'll see.
It's now streaming on Facebook. That's what it says on the here.
Bum, bum. Okay, rumor has it might be working. So hi, welcome to Good Enough Now Book Club Module 1. This is the Peanut Gallery. So everyone has given me permission to live stream this. I am relatively new to technology. If y'all have not learned that by now, get with it, because this is shocking that I was able to figure all this out. So what we're doing tonight, now we've gone through some little base introductions. Y'all, book club attendees, each module, there's 5 modules, and we're going to smurf the last 2 together because it's all the now section of the book. Spoiler alert. Really what it was is Jax and I were having a conversation on New Year's Day. Hey, are we having the first book club meeting today because it's Friday? And I was like, what? No, that's not happening. So surprise, we didn't have one on the 1st. So this is the first one. So it's January 8th, module 1. Thank you, Jax, for giving me permission to not have to be perfect and everything, even though I wrote it down on a sheet of paper. Although I might probably needed to tell Tara that we're not doing it because she was kind of expecting it. Whoopsie. Anyway, so the way that the book club works, for those of you that are new, maybe you haven't done your homework, that's totally fine. Maybe you have, you're about to show off if you have. So I wanted to create something that, like why I even wrote the book, I guess, is I wanted to create something that allowed me and other people to take responsibility for how I ended up this way. There's not necessarily judgment. I do lots of self-deprecating jokes, but like the habits of how I turned out came from the lived experiences that I have experienced, and how I show up and how I'm in relationship with other people, and when I get defensive and when I get quiet and when I get angry and when I get bossy and when I get controlling, and when all those things happen is because my life has taught me that's the best way to be, right? So there are people that I vehemently disagree with, and somehow their life has taught them to also be that way. Now, can I apply this to everyone all the time? Absolutely not. Can I even apply it to myself all of the time? No, but I can apply it to myself more often than not. So then that was kind of the initial kernel of like, okay, so then why did I end up this way, and why might that be different than somebody else, to possibly be able to see different perspectives. So I wanted to like pull that apart into what will probably be painstaking processes, where instead of talking about diversity from like a vocabulary way, it's just you and your lived experience. And so throughout the whole book, there are all different kinds of activities that I have had people text message me, I am very mad at you right now. And you get to do your own work and challenge yourself as deep as you want to do the activity, so that you can learn basically which parts of you want to keep and which parts of you want to edit, and which parts of you are at least maybe you could acknowledge are inconsistent, right? Like just that is like a huge recognition. So as we go through the book, that's kind of the plan, so that you would read the book, do your own activities, figure your own stuff out. And then in the book club itself or in the back of the book, and it doesn't matter if you're in the first edition of the book or the second edition of the book or an ebook or looking at the audio book, it should all be there. Although looking at an audio book could be tricky. So maybe that was misspoken. So at the end, there are discussion questions. And so what we are going to be doing each Friday, 5 o'clock Pacific, is we're going to go through the discussion questions, and wherever the conversation goes is where the conversation goes. And that sounds great. For the actual book club participants, I'm encouraging you to respond to at least 2, sometimes 3 of the questions. You don't even have to do all of them. I just really want you to be like thoughtful about them and think about you, right? So I'm going to go through the questions. I'm going to ask them aloud, and whoever wants to talk gets to talk and gets to share, and you get to ask questions or follow-ups with each other, do whatever you need to do. What I love about these discussions is that it's very hard to answer these questions from someone else's perspective. Now, I'm sure one of you is going to be like, hold my beer. I'm happy to answer this from my brother's perspective, but your brother's not here, so we don't care. My brother's not here. You're welcome. So let's just stick with the discussion prompts and your own experience. Sound good? So the first discussion question is to consider the story, and a number of you answered this one, to consider the story of the 2 men undergoing chemotherapy and the concept of covering, which is actually Kenji Yoshino's book. It's called Covering. So a number of you mentioned how much you love that. It's a great book. The concept of covering, and have you ever experienced or observed the behavior of altering oneself to fit in? And how does this concept impact day-to-day work for you? So a number of you answered like, oh, does it? So does anybody want to talk about even naming this thing and what it means or how it shows up in your life? This is the race to see who unmutes first. Alan, you win.
Oh, I think I posted about covering when I was younger about being gay and just always like questioning or trying to scope the environment to feel like to see if it was a safe environment to disclose who I am. I think that has changed obviously now for me, but I still think covering happens at work in professional setting in terms of more about what is like professional enough, or what is like, is everybody wearing a suit, and should I be wearing a suit, and or should I be just wearing what I feel comfortable wearing? So I feel like that's also somehow covering, like, or kind of adjusting to the norm. So
that's awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Anita, I want to call on you. So if you don't want to go, Erin raised her finger so she can go first. But Anita, your example I love the most because I also do exactly the same thing every morning, and it is harder and easier on different days. So we'll go to Erin and then Anita. Go ahead, Erin.
I was just going to branch off of what Alan just shared. I just started a brand new job this week. So I made it through 5 days of a new job. And I actually had that thought, Alan, about fitting in, and I'm discovering new people. I haven't met any of them before, and I'm meeting them all through Zoom. So it's sort of an interesting way to connect with people and be able to feel them out, what they're thinking of you or how you're viewing them. But also I can still wear really comfortable pants because they're not seeing any of that. So it's a really interesting space to be in when you're not physically going in to meet your colleagues that you'll be working with. So just thinking the same thing that you were sharing, Alan.
It is interesting. I know a number of people who've started new positions inside of hybrid models or sheltering in place or working from home. And then there's going to be a whole new thing whenever people get to go to work again. It'll be interesting. And some of the folks that I know work in hospitals, and they're looking forward to seeing their coworkers because they are covered from head to toe vast majority of the shifts. So there's a level of intimacy that's happening without the usual variables of getting to know people. So it'll happen all over again. Interesting. So, Anita, do you mind sharing your awesome example that I was like wooing you on when I was reading it?
Are you referring to the thing that the speaker at the conference told us to do?
The mirror, yes.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, you can look later if you want. What I posted was really kind of when aren't we covering, and really almost from the second we wake in the morning, we cover up, right? Like we're covered up sleeping most of the time, most of us probably, and then we are temporarily like revealed, and then we cover right back up. So this speaker at the conference, it was a women's conference, and I don't remember how this worked into her speech, and this is literally one of the main nuggets I took from it. She said, you need to speak love to yourself and be kind to yourself. And she said, she wanted us to not put anything on after we showered and just stand in front of the mirror naked while we put on makeup and dry our hair and all those things. And I remember sitting there going, oh girl, no, not doing that. No, no, even I don't want to see this. And then I was like, wait a second, this body has done a lot of things and birthed a few, 3 kids and has made it to be 50 something, and gravity happens. I mean, I like cookies, that has happened, so whatever. And so I do that most days now. Right now I haven't as much because I'm freezing, right? I'm like, wow, it's really cold in here if you don't put a robe on or something. Because it's Iowa and it's winter, so it's cold here. Anyway, so yeah, for me, that's kind of metaphorical, like, well, and then I'm going to cover back up. I'm going to look a certain way, and I'm even going to act a certain way, whether it's on Zoom or in person, because I'm covering up that maybe I feel grumpy, tired, stressed, my dog pooped in his kennel. I mean, whatever, like I'm just covering up something kind of all the time to just be able to go about your day, I guess. So I didn't say all that in the thing. I just expanded on it.
The twist that I would give, and then I'll see if anybody else has a comment on this one. We'll go to the next question. But my therapist once told me, or some woo-woo retreat I went to or something, is that it's not just getting ready in the morning, being naked in front of a mirror, but to put lotion on my body and keep rubbing it in until it is all soaked in. So you can't like squirt, yep, it's done. Like it has to like soak all the way in, which is a very time-consuming process. But you do learn how not to overuse lotion because you're like, ooh. But what I realized is that it put me back in touch with all of me in a way that I did it every single day for a month. And I hadn't realized how much I don't look at myself. I don't look at my face. I don't look at my hair. Every once in a while, I check for that like one hair that grows in every 3 months or so. But otherwise, I'm not present with myself. So there's covering clothes, but then there's also kind of covering and attention.
Oh, interesting.
And if I'm not even a part of my own life, then how am I going to be responsible for how I'm being in other people's lives? Anyway, I just thought it was really powerful. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Julianne.
Well, I didn't really have an answer to this, but after listening to you and Anita, what's interesting to me is since I was a little girl, as my mom said, I love to be naked. I'm in my house naked all the time. And what you just said, I have very dry skin, but because of that, every time I take a shower, which isn't every day because I live alone and we're in COVID. Okay. So anyway, but every day I take a shower, I put oil all over my body and rub it in. So I am actually spending that time you're talking about. I didn't do it for any reason. It's just something I do because I have really dry skin. So it just made me think, wow, I'm getting that connection, but I didn't plan on getting that connection. But now it's a part of who I am and what I do. It's not like something I do for a reason. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. So thank you for that insight.
Sure. Any other thoughts in reference to the 2 people going on chemotherapy story or covering? Jim?
Yes. Well, it brings up the whole issue of vulnerability, and you were this example at the auto dealership. it was extreme vulnerability, right? These people were undergoing treatment for cancer and hiding it, but we're all vulnerable and we all hide it. I mean, I think we're brought up to do that. At least I know I was. I know most people were. You know, it starts as a little boy. You're supposed to hide your vulnerability. You're not supposed to cry past the age of 6 or whatever. And so it's, it's a potent topic, and I'm sure I'll be exposing more layers of vulnerability until I die, because programming is so intense to conceal it.
Mm. Yeah. Other thoughts?
I have one. I was having a discussion this week with a colleague. We were talking about, why are people not signing up for this class about living with chronic conditions?
Mhm.
And I said, hello, I have a chronic condition, and I'm not going to sign up for it because I don't want to admit that I have a chronic condition. And it fits in also with, if you're in the park and recreation world and asking people if their kids have special needs. It's a kind of a catch-22, is that you want your kid to be normal and fit in, but you also want them to be safe and have special circumstances. And so I, how do we get that permission to give information out? It has to be a trusted, safe person to give information to, because it's not going to be like, sign up on a registration and you just say, oh yeah, and my kid has ADHD and he might run away from the class. That's not, I would have to make sure that I felt welcome there first to then disclose it. So that safety and trust is really an important part of how much you would be exposing yourself.
Yep. That's interesting. I had mentioned at the very beginning that because of COVID, or since COVID, I guess, I enrolled in an MBA program. And so I am a classic Gen Xer in all of the ways, latchkey, like undiagnosed everything. I'm fine, right? So I'm in this MBA program. I have not taken any kind of classes since the 1900s. So there was no internet. There are no paper books anymore, and they're online classes because of COVID. It's been a learning curve. So one of the classes had a timed test, and it was over 9 chapters, I think. And we had like an hour and a half to take the test. And it was taking me like 12 hours to get through the homework, just because none of this is stuff that I ever learned in ceramics. So I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to do 9 chapters in an hour and a half. And I'm like a high achieving student who's used to making A's in like an hour. And it was the clock, like the idea of like tick, tick, tick happening in these online video games that I'd be taking the test in. And I like lost my mind. So I was talking to my therapist about this, and I've had a therapist forever, and I'm super open about having a therapist. And she's like, well, why don't you go to the Disability Resource Center and get extended time? Because of your PTSD and your anxiety, you would clearly qualify for extended time. And I was like, what? I don't have anxiety and PTSD. And she's like, I'm sorry, did the line switch? Right? Like, I have a lovely relationship with the woman, but I had never been diagnosed with anything. I have never gotten any kind of accommodations or medications about anything. And I was like, I don't need any extra time. I'm fine. And I didn't know that that stuff was coming. I didn't see it coming. I didn't know where it came from. Turns out I qualified for double time and made a 50 on the first test in double time. In case any of you are interested, Jack's Job Security, I am not going to be anyone's managerial accountant. You're welcome. But with that knowledge, I had expectations. So now where expectations and covering come together, I'm going to use that as the transition to the second question, is that one of the quotes that is pulling from the book, which is weird to talk about because I wrote the book, but I had a raucous conversation with myself between first and second edition. So with each question or situation, we think we know what is going to happen next. We might be right. We might be wrong. Share a time when you made an assumption and were validated or had to re-examine your assumptions. So literally in the middle of like trying to take this test, I couldn't accept help. And I also couldn't break from the covering identity that I had been holding. And also really have never been treated, diagnosed, offered resources, assisted, seen, being helped in a way. So I wanted to almost stay correctly wrong, right? So where do expectations, your assumptions about yourself, where do those things show up? And what does it feel like for you when you have to like call yourself out and re-examine your own assumptions that you might be making or navigating yourself? Julianne?
Well, this question really resonated for me because it's something I've been working on for a long time, as far as recognizing when I have judgments and then being aware enough to recognize when I'm proven incorrect. And I find it to be a really enriching, growing experience that I've been able to do only because I've become keenly aware. So it could be something simple like, well, Jane's never going to call, whoever Jane is, right? And then of course, Jane calls, and then being able to look at myself and saying, yeah, why did you make that judgment? Like, that was ridiculous. And it gives me an opportunity to do that. Or it could be something more extreme. But like I said, that's one of my favorite ways to grow and learn, is to, I guess, give my own self a safe space to say, okay, you had a judgment, but I guess I kind of feel like it's okay because I recognize how I screwed up later. And yeah, and it happens all the time. I mean, I'm way far from perfect for that. So my only saving grace is that I recognize when something different happens, of the difference between what I thought and what happened. But it's a common occurrence.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll speak up because as you were explaining all of this, something happened earlier in the week and it culminated this today. So I do work in a hospital and it is a bit tense and we're trying to get some new equipment. And I was very explicit on Monday to the product reps and the sales rep what I needed, giving them right down to the product numbers. And when the area distribution rep came back 2 days ago with the quote, I don't know what he was looking at. And so it took me 24 hours to just calm down before I fired off an email to him, because that's what I would have done normally. And this morning, I woke up and thought, okay, there's 2 ways you can handle this. The right way, which would, have some decorum about yourself, or just blast them. And so I took the right way, and I didn't even respond to him. I responded to the people who actually produced the product. And I said, I'm not sure what the problem is here, but I need this fixed today. And well, it was fixed in 5 minutes. And I look at that as a major growth period for me, because a few years ago, I would have blasted off the other email, starting with what the hell's wrong with you and can't you read?
Which is a great icebreaker.
Yeah.
Really leads to a lot of conversations of like, what the hell's wrong with you? Please tell me more about that. Yeah.
But the other thing, I had a conversation with my cousin on this very topic of, I will write an email and read it probably 20 or 30 times before I send it now, to make sure that what I'm writing is actually what the intent is, as opposed to just dribbling away and hoping they get the message. So if I'm asking for something, I'm very specific in my ask. And if somebody's asking something of me, I'm very specific in my answer. Because email has just gotten to be a way of blowing off steam, as opposed to an effective way to communicate.
Well, Abby, you're doing great foreshadowing. So in both versions of the book, it is page 192, so that I can remember page 192. But to jump ahead, foreshadowing, we'll get there. But there's a flow chart that is that we'll talk about slowing down so that you can be clear about what your intentions are. Most of the conversations, like when I get brought in or something because something has happened or there's conflict resolution or something's going on, almost always what it is someone displacing their lack of actual firmly understanding what their intentions were because they just lobbed something out there and assumed it would work. And then when it didn't work, they get defensive about what their intentions were.
Yeah.
Right. And defensiveness paired with what the hell is wrong with you, not a really good conversation starter.
No.
Right. When we get to that piece, it's about slowing down. Like it's like 4 steps before words even escape your face or your fingertips or your thumbs. Texting also matters. Right. So like how to slow that down and be able to understand. So great foreshadowing for what is coming. Says the person who's been fired every single time in response to an email I wrote. Learn from the expert, people. All right. Any other thoughts about possibly finding out that you made an assumption and you might possibly not be 100% accurate about something? I'm sure no one else falls into this category. It's just us. Oh, Alan, good job.
Yeah, I think that comes up a lot when I make an assumption about people's intention. And I feel like, especially if something upsets me, and then I assume that there was a bad intention, then I think that's when I potentially could be just like really get upset at somebody because I assume they had a bad intention. It's less about what they did. And I think I try to slow down and say, maybe they just didn't say this because they're just were trying to hurt me. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. So I try as much as I can to not to change my mindset to say like, okay, maybe the intention was not bad. I try to do it, but I'm not always successful.
Mm-hmm. Right. Luckily, we're talking about doing this some of the time because it's better than nothing never, right? Awesome. All right. Are you ready for question number 3? This was also very popular in y'all's comments because it's about the Volkswagen van. So when I was writing the first edition of the book, I don't know if any of you have ever attempted to write a book, but it's not a very fun process. And there's a quote, again, somebody said a quote, something about that if you ever want to see like a really clean house, go to someone who is procrastinating and or writing a book, because writer's block, you're like, I don't know what to do, and you start cleaning out a closet. So I was on a dog walk because I was stuck and trying to figure something out. I also tell a story in the book where I'm painting lawn furniture in the front yard because I was writing a book. So the designers of a new Volkswagen electric van at some point determined that the van is good enough to be actual manufactured. While there may be problems that become apparent after release or even recalls, at least the first model is released. Talk about a time when you determined something was good enough. How did that go? How did it feel? Talk about a time when you made the decision something wasn't good enough yet. That's the key. How did you make that decision? And do you believe that good enough stifles innovation? Spoiler alert, or like seeds it? This is the conversation I had with my 3 dogs while we were on a dog walk, and I came back and finished writing the chapter. So what are your thoughts about innovation, good enough, the first rounds? When does it get released? When do you keep working on it? Anita.
I would say for me, and maybe others, this is a time when context matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
My advisor for my dissertation had to repeatedly tell me, good enough, done dissertation is the right dissertation, right? Like, so that's a context where, as a student, you're not going to write your best work ever, even though that's what you think you're doing and you're dreaming about and whatever. They're like, no, get done. But then there are other times, like Jim Collins in his book Good to Great talks about good is the enemy of great, right? So like good enough could be the, so it depends on the context, maybe, when one of my kids is having a panic attack about something in a class because it's finals week, I'm like, let's talk about, is good enough okay right now? Can we, because I hate to see what's happening to you. And, this isn't a matter of getting an A or an F in a class. This is a matter of getting an A or a B on the paper. Like, good enough might be okay right now. So anyway.
It's a great point, and I'm sure other people will have something to say, but there's enough medical people here that you're going to be able to tell me the word that I'm forgetting. But I used to tell a joke that this is totally fine for technology or apps because you can always just get an update, but I don't want my orthopedic surgeon to read this book, right?
Yes,
Left knee, right knee, whatever, it's good enough. Like, no, it's actually not good enough. But I work enough in the medical industry that this word that I'm forgetting, that one of y'all is probably going to say, it's not return on investment, but it's something
accountability.
No, it's different. So when you are in doing a surgery, there is also a chance, or what I have learned is that the surgeon has to get to a place where you're beyond a point of return or something like this, where if you keep futzing with this, it's actually going to get worse. So you actually do have to stop, even though it's not perfect in whatever the surgeries. I'm clearly a ceramics major, but I didn't realize that was a thing. So I had to stop telling my orthopedic surgeon joke, although I still would point the right body part is just a good starting place. But even when you're doing that, when you get in, like, let's say you're removing a tumor, right? So a really good friend of mine just had a biopsy, found out she has cancer for the 4th time. And when they were doing the biopsy, they were trying to take out as much as they could. They didn't get all of the margins, but they took out as much as they could to then biopsy it, got the biopsy back. It is cancerous. So they have to go back in because they know they didn't get it all, right? So somewhere in there is the same concept, right? Now, it's not a map that's going to get updated overnight. It's maybe a little bit more life or death related, obviously. But it is interesting that there's still the balance of possibly diminishing returns, 2 points, Julie. So that there's still a balance between trying to do everything perfect all the time, which may or may not lead to some professions' God complex reputation, right? And like fast food, like people making my Taco Bell, like they're like, technically there's lettuce in there. What, right? I would like it spread out over the Mexican pizza and it's on the left side. But it's fine because they went like that, right? Somewhere between there is our better judgment. And if we're talking about tasks, or we're talking about creativity or innovation or things like this, there's one piece of that conversation. But when you start internalizing this about your attempts at a relationship, or Alan, when you said like, you get the conversation and you kind of feel yourself having a response, like there's a 2.0 application that can happen of like, wait a minute, what are some different options of their possible intention? That's the 2.0 or the 3.0 or the 4.0. You're kind of able to maybe upgrade or at least different editions of the same thing to then determine how you're going to respond. All of that is kind of related into this question. So what does that feel like? And does it stifle the ability of trying, or does it actually encourage the ability to try even though you might fail? Hillary. Y'all are so polite, like raising your hands. It's cute.
So I feel like I'm fortunate enough to work in an industry where we like things to go perfectly, but we know they're not, so we plan for them to not go perfectly. But sometimes just getting something out there and trying it is our best way to see how it's going to be better, because sometimes we anticipate people are going to react one way to a new program that we're offering, and they hate it or they love it. We just put out a watercolor class. It's something new that we've not done before, filled up within a couple of days in 2 different sections. We were like, what just happened? I mean, I'm going to it tomorrow, so I helped fill the class, but we sometimes get surprised, and that in a good way. And so now we know kind of what direction to take instead of waiting until we have the watercolor class for everybody at all these different times. Just we get the luxury of throwing stuff at the wall and taking what I consider calculated risks.
Mhm.
And we're fortunate enough, there's no surgery or anything like that involved. We're the fun industry, if you will. And so we get to try these things, experiment. And I feel fortunate enough that it doesn't have to exact all the time because I have this perfectionist part of me. But I also temper it with let's just try it and see what happens. And if it fails, we'll either retool it or just move on and do something else.
Mhm. Yeah, go ahead.
So, kind of going off of what Hillary just said, I'm actually, I've been in radio since I was 18, and I got into it in an independent station. It was just totally random that I wound up with this on-air job. And so I started doing it, and I felt like I was terrible at first. I was like, I like the music and I really like people and concerts. So let's just do this. And I had no idea kind of how to go about all of it. It was, I call it the duct tape studio because it was an independent station. We didn't have any money. We didn't have fancy equipment, but we had airwaves. So we went for it. Then quite literally overnight, they sold that station. Overnight, I started up at a corporate hip hop station. And so I went from Christian rock to corporate hip hop, and then went from that to now doing middays for a top 40 station here in Southeast Kansas. So what happened though was I did the same thing where it was like I was just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what stuck. And I kind of put myself out there just to see who kind of reacted and how it worked out. And it went from volunteering as a weekend DJ at an independent station to middays now, pardon my 2-year-old, to middays now at a corporate station. So, I mean, it's, you know, it was good enough at the point to where it kept seeding that innovation and kind of teaching me how to kind of interact with my audience a little bit more. Seeing the ratings come back was always like, oh my gosh, it's terrifying, but then, you know, it turns out pretty good. So it's working. But yeah, that innovation happens because you make mistakes and you learn from them and you keep going. So.
I think one of the scariest things that I tell supervisors or managers when I'm working with them is I ask them, I guess, is how do you reward failure? And they're like, oh, that's not allowed. Like there is no failure. That is completely not allowed. And I'm like, okay, how do you reward trying and it doesn't work out? And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, so you don't reward failure. Heard that loud and clear. How do you, I guess maybe I should ask this question first, is how do you reward not trying? And usually there's some internal joke about like promote them. So then somewhere in the middle is how do you reward trying when it doesn't work out? Which we're not going to call failure, but we're going to try like took initiative, tried a new thing, was resourceful and scrappy and came up with a new idea and took some duct tape and tried to figure out how to make do with what's going on. And some of it worked, some of it didn't work. And they all say they wish that more people would do that. They call it initiative, they call it scrappy and resourceful, being innovative, being creative, working as a team, doing the best you can with what you got. Like that's all embedded in there. But if you call it failure, nobody wants to do it. And if you call it don't try, then you know you're not supposed to do it. So then that's where this is, right? So like back to Anita, to your point about what the language that I got challenged with from not just good to great, but exceptionalism, is that when I first came up, and Julianne was there at the very beginning of this, but when I came up with this like good enough concept, I was burnt out and I wanted to quit. I have no monetizable skills, clearly, other than like folding a fitted sheet, which isn't even monetizable, but very impressive. So then I'm trying to cure my burnout and I'm listening to audience members while like I just want to go home, right? And they're all telling me about conversations they can't try because they have failed or it will fail or it's just not worth it because it's going to fail. So then they have opted for this other thing of just like, well, I just avoid the concept. I avoid the person. I avoid the topic. And I'm like, well, how the hell is that? That's not a relationship, right? Like, I mean, it is a relationship, but it's not one you'd really want to brag about. So then I started kind of developing this thing in the middle. And Anita, when you said what you said, the people who would so like viscerally get pissed off at the idea of good enough. I had this little image in my head because I'm very competitive of like a giant eagle and an American flag, right? Of like, we're exceptional and that's it. Like this kind of thing. And so I was like, okay, so you go over there and you read those books, right? This is going to be for the others of us who haven't gotten off the couch and actually could have a heated conversation about which flavor of Doritos is better, because we're going to have a really hard time pulling off exceptional. P.S. The answer is Cool Ranch. So what do normal people do? And that's why I decided to kind of like lean into this and see if it would even kind of work or stick or whatever. And many of you mentioned being in like different audiences or workshops that I did. You were all guinea pigs. You probably are quoted in the book, don't even know it. But what I realized is that this isn't working. This isn't serving us. And this is where we're stuck. And instead of it trying to fix everybody else, the hardest work I found to do was, instead of fixing my audiences, was to actually like swallow this pill myself. So being responsible for who and how you are, doing the best you can with what you got some of the time, is better than nothing never. So then here we are, which is our last discussion question, which is good enough isn't about perfection, thank goodness. It is dependent on the possibility of the unknown while operating with what is currently known, which I think is interesting in the time of COVID, because P.S., none of us actually know much more information than we knew March 6th. In my world, it was March 6th. I don't know what everybody's dates are. We're all going to have our own date. We still don't know very much more. And we figured it out, sort of, how to do things. If you want to play a fun game, because it's 2021, flashback to like the day the world changed. Some of us have had multiple days that the world has changed, and you've ended up here. So might as well work with this set of tools. This is the known, which for some of us is really bad news. But okay, this is at least the known set of information. So what is there a possibility of a possibility working with this known set? That to me is how you separate perfection or ideal from good enough. How does that land on you? What are your thoughts? We're only in the prologue, so don't get too deep. Jim, you gave me a thumbs up. That's affirming.
Yeah, it lands well. It's a really good concept, very workable, and it strikes me that, well, I was thinking about, as a writer, I'm writing a novel now. It's been 6 years, and I'm not going to publish this thing until it's good enough. And it's not good enough yet. So there's, and in this case, I don't think the good is, the good would be the enemy of the great if I published it now or in 3 months. I don't know, maybe another year or so until it's ready. But where was I going with this? I think the core value for me is the sort of as I look at myself as a person, whether or not I finish this freaking book, I'm good enough. I'm good enough now. And it's good enough that I'm just trying to write the book. So, and that's an antidote. That perspective is an antidote to the feelings of low self-esteem that come up when I get overwhelmed and think I'm never going to finish this book, or everyone's going to hate this book, or no one's going to like this book, that kind of thing.
And such an interesting flip, right? To the person that I met in my local community who was like, why is everyone not talking or in conversation about gun access and gun laws? We're just digging a bigger trench. How do I have this conversation? What's that lady's name? Right? Somehow you got referred to who knew what color my hair was at that time. Do you remember what color my hair was at that time? That's a good question.
It changed about once every 2 weeks, I think.
Right, that was pre-COVID. Now we're at 3 months. Don't get excited. So if you saw a problem and you tried to figure out a solution to lead to a conversation that most people would just completely avoid, what an amazing act of initiative and creativity and innovation. And then we facilitated this thing. We had no idea where it was going to go, and it was fruitful.
Yeah.
Same person has been writing a book for 300 years, because I remember you were still writing your novel when you still lived here, right? That is a complication that exists in the same person. And in an ideal universe, you would be able to give that grace to somebody else. Because they're probably terrible at one thing and amazing at another thing. I'm using extreme words on purpose, right? So can we give ourselves that grace?
Right.
You might be right about your book. You might be wrong about your book, and no one will know until you get somebody else in conversation with that, right? Like there's a sense of bravery and courage with yourself as well as with other people, but you can be both of those things at the same time.
Right. And grace is an apt word for it.
Yeah, it is hard. Short, little, powerful word. It's hard. Right. Dick Cheney has not gotten grace from me yet. Julianne, your hand was up.
A couple of things. First of all, grace is my favorite word. And we definitely don't give ourselves as much as we give others. Just a few things, one off of what Jim said and one off of what Anita said. For all of us, like what he was saying about his book, that book doesn't define you as a person, right? And I think as individuals, we can get stuck on one aspect of our multifaceted life and get stuck with that defining us. So, which of course it doesn't. And then I want to go back to what Anita said about context, because for me, good enough has everything to do with context. I was fortunate enough to get myself involved with the National Speakers Association when I first started speaking, and learned early on from those who knew that good enough was better than nothing at all, right? And I've written a few books too. And one of the answers that I wrote in Canvas was, I believe that, Jess, you told me that 1,000 people, although that is an exaggeration, edited your book, and your name was misspelled on the last page or something like that. So, writing a book is a great experience to understand that if you're looking for perfection, you absolutely will never, ever, ever, ever publish a book, because I thought writing the book was the easiest part, right? And then it's all the work afterwards. So when I'm doing something that's my work, I don't want it to be crappy, but I'm not into perfection. And I owe that, I think, to NSA teaching me that. So if I wrote an article or a newsletter or did a video or all the podcasts I did, if they were good enough, I would get them out there. But and I think for probably many, many, many years in my life, I carried that over into any kind of relationship with people. And that's the piece I've changed, because good enough, who was talking about that? Abby. I've written those emails, totally get it. That's no longer acceptable for me. For me to do that. So good enough is okay for me if it affects me, But if I'm affecting other people physically or emotionally, then good enough isn't good enough. And I want to put more thought. I'm not going to get it to perfection, but it can be perfection from me. I know I've learned I don't have responsibility for, the other people and what they're doing, but it's more important on that end, if that makes sense.
Sure. Abby, go ahead, and then I'll do a follow-up.
Dovetail what you were just saying, Julie. So for years, I was the notoriously late person. I was late to everything. Didn't matter what it was. And one day I woke up and said, this is being completely disrespectful to everybody else. And if you need to get up, if I need to get up 2 hours earlier to get somewhere on time, then that's on me.
Mm-hmm.
And overnight completely changed that within myself. So it is possible, but what you just said, it's not about being good enough for somebody else. I had to be good enough for me to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, and I'll end on this piece and then we'll introduce the next module for next Friday. But for me, what was really important was two different kind of things came together, which when you're reading the book, like I have these weird things that are not connected all the time and they crash together. And then I have this idea. It's just how my brain works. And I went to a training that said I'm 100% responsible for my relationship with other people. To which I was like, I don't think, have you seen a ruler? No, I don't think that's true. But the reality is that I have no control over what the other person is doing. I am 100% responsible for my relationship with them. And that was just kind of like, right? Because what I was doing was focusing on the stuff I have no control over and complaining about it instead of dealing with the stuff that I do have control over. So around this time is also when I read Brene Brown's Daring Greatly, which I highly recommend. And one of the things that I was like, I think when most people read that book, at some point you throw it across the room because she's been following you around and you didn't see her and you didn't even get to go to lunch with her, but she's like talking to you because she's observed your idiotic behavior. Maybe it's just me. So one of the times I threw the book around the room was that as a control freak, I am trying to control all the details so that nothing bad happens. Well, spoiler alert, bad things still happen. But what is also the case when you control everything down is that you also are not prepared for spontaneity or joy. And it can still happen, but you'll likely miss it because it wasn't in your control. And I'm at writing the book and reading this at the same time. And what I realized is that I was so focused on the preparation, and I'm a triple Virgo, the preparation of something terrible happening, that everything that wasn't planned or in my control resonated in the same way. And that included happy things and joyful things because they weren't in my control. And I decided that that is not how I wanted to live my life. So I want to take 100% responsibility for who and how I am in the world, when I'm late, what my intentions are, who I talk to, who I don't talk to. I want to take 100% responsibility for that some of the time, right? So then when I haven't done it and I haven't been thinking about it and I find myself in yet another quagmire, I can start off with like, yeah, Jessica, welcome back. You clocked out for a second. Now here you are again, and you're back in the exact same puddles that you would be in even if you had been paying attention. All of that was kind of happening at once. The last little piece, like the third stream that came in, was my audience members. The most common question I get asked, specifically around racism and like transphobia, homophobia, is, well, just tell me all the words because I'm tired of offending people. And I just don't want to offend anybody anymore. Like, isn't there a handout or something? And so then I usually respond, hold on, I'm offended, just because that's funny. But what is important is instead of preparing to be uncomfortable, what if we just took responsibility for I am likely to offend someone? I may or may not even find out about it, but I'm 100% responsible, so I am likely to also make a mistake. I'm now entering the conversation in a very different way because I'm taking responsibility for something I may not even find out about that didn't go the way that I intended. Now, some people's response is to go hide in a cave and not deal with human beings, but then you're going to upset your Aunt Mildred because you didn't go to her birthday party, right? Like you're still going to upset people even if you're not engaging with those people, because not engaging is how you're choosing to be in relationship with them. That little vortex almost did not get the book written because it rang so true for me. And I was so disinterested in being that honest with myself that I was like, I am certain there's some other book I need to read. But it's from that place that I decided to write the book. So it is divided into 3 sections: good, enough, and now. Part 1, good, is very much about buzzword of the day, rubric. It is about the rubric because it is really the heady part of the book. So it very much goes into the model when I realized what was happening and these patterns that were occurring in my life and other people's life. And so the first section, good, is chapter 1 and chapter 2.
Is this the rubric?
That is you're showing off because we know each other in different ways, but sort of, yes. What you're holding up is part of the handouts, and the rubric is what is heady, what is hearty, what is action oriented. You'll know it gets there. But the idea is that we all respond out of habit because our life has taught us how to respond, and because our life has taught us that our survival, our preparation, our judgments come from the place where we have learned how to come from. We pretty much assume everybody else had exactly the same experiences, therefore is coming exactly the same way. So when they don't, there's something wrong with them. So premise, PS, is that everyone's life has taught themselves how to be, who to be, how to feel prepared, where to make judgments, what assumptions to make. But their life very likely is very different than your own life. Even if you grew up in the same household with the same parents, even if you are in exactly the same relationship, even if you are sheltering in place with 1,200 square feet, my husband and I are experiencing this differently. And that's not a bad thing on him. It's not a bad thing on me. It's that we're experiencing life differently because we're 2 different people coming from different lenses, and where his lenses obviously are the wrong ones because he doesn't even like remove the lint from the dryer. That is obviously wrong. But I may or may not also have some habits that go against his grain, right? With largely being the loudest person on the planet. So I can't fix him. Trust me, I've tried. So I'm going to try occasionally to do this work. And it's from that place that I invite you to a module dose of the book, which will go over section 1, chapter 1 and chapter 2 next Friday. Thoughts, comments, questions before we move along? Awesome.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned about happiness and joy, and can you just repeat what you said about Brené Brown, and you realized it was preventing you from having joy? How was that tied in with being good enough?
Sure. So there's kind of like a triangle piece of it, right? So, and I'm paraphrasing Brené Brown. Somebody's going to quote me and be like, that's not what she said. So the idea is that the control freak is what I took from the book. So it's all my perspective. So I'm clamping down really hard in control so that nothing else bad happens. Like no one else dies, no surprises, no more grief. I don't already have attachment disorders, right? Like I'm going to control every single second of my entire life so that I'm prepared for it. And then nothing bad will happen. Well, in doing that, everything spontaneous that happened, even the happy, joyful stuff, I would have the same anxiety-based response because it was unexpected. So I was not allowing joy and spontaneity and happiness into my life unless it was on my calendar.
Got it. Thank you.
No worries. Fun facts. Bad stuff still happens. Good stuff still happens. And I'm still a control freak that is very rigid with my calendar. That is very true. And the good enough aspect is recognizing that my life is not wearing Spanx. Stuff is going to happen, and I'm just going to have to trust that I have the tools to deal with it in the moment. And sometimes that is a gorgeous sunset I didn't see coming at all, and makes me 2 hours late to a meeting because I got lost in a cloud. That actually happened a couple days ago because I was staring at the ocean in my car. But it also happens with really horrible things that I'm completely dumbfounded and didn't see coming. I am still the common denominator in all of those things, even though I was not prepared for it.
Great.
Helpful?
Very. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, high five. I'm stopping the live stream. Y'all are the best.